It all began with a simple question, one that seemed harmless enough at the time. "Do you even care when I walk into a room anymore?" I asked her, my voice steady but laced with the weight of unspoken grievances. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stared at her phone, scrolling absently, as if it held more value than the conversation we were or weren't having. When she finally spoke, her tone was calm, almost clinical, like she was reciting tomorrow's weather forecast. "If you want attention, deserve it first." The words hit me like a brick to the chest, sinking deep and heavy where they landed. I didn't yell or throw anything. I just nodded silently, turned, and walked upstairs to finish folding my clothes. She didn't follow. Instead, she turned up the volume on the TV, drowning out whatever tension lingered between us. It wasn't always this way. I had been there for her through so much. The 3 jobs that didn't work out, the fitness brand idea that fizzled before it started, 6 months of therapy she claimed she didn't need but attended anyway because I encouraged her. And now here we were, reduced to this cold exchange about earning affection. The next morning, I made a decision. The lease was under my name, so I stopped paying it. She never noticed. I canceled the shared credit card. Still, no questions from her. Life went on as though nothing had changed. Except something had. She came home later each night, her eyes brighter, her smile wider. She hummed while brushing her hair, a habit I hadn't seen in years. But she never once looked me in the eye. Then one evening, standing by the upstairs window, I saw her step out of a black SUV, a car she'd never mentioned. She stood at the curb, smiled back into the vehicle, and waved. That smile, it wasn't meant for me. It hadn't been for a long time. Something inside me snapped. I decided to follow her, not closely, just enough to see where she went. 2 blocks down, she entered a small Mediterranean restaurant neither of us had ever visited. She took a seat by the window, pulled out her phone, and typed furiously. Moments later, a man joined her. He exuded confidence, leaning in as though he already knew her intimately. She laughed, a laugh I hadn't heard since our honeymoon, and the sound cut through me like a knife. She told me to earn her attention, yet it was clear she'd already given it away. That night, sleep eluded me completely. I lay there with my back to her, listening to the rhythmic tapping of her fingers against her phone screen. Every exhale, every soft chuckle felt like a betrayal. She thought I was asleep. I wasn't. In truth, I hadn't slept well in months. You don't sleep when your heart is still awake, wrestling with the realization that the place it called home is no longer safe. Around 2 a.m., she got up and went to the bathroom. I waited until I heard the faucet running, then seized the moment. Her laptop sat open on the ottoman, the screen dim but unlocked. She always assumed I wouldn't touch her things, and until that night, she was right. But desperation has a way of rewriting rules. Her password? Still my birthday. The irony stung. It was the last thing she'd planned around me. I opened her messages first. A name I didn't recognize appeared at the top of the list. Nathan R. No hearts, no saved photos. Clean slate. Yet there it was, a digital breadcrumb trail of inside jokes, late-night check-ins, and cryptic plans. Tell him you're busy this Saturday. Wear the black one. You remember what it does to me. You were stunning tonight. Still can't get you out of my mind. I stared at those words as if they were etched in stone. Shock didn't register. What hit harder was how natural it all seemed for her, like she'd built a separate world that thrived while I stood frozen on the outside. The sound of running water stopped. I closed the laptop and returned to the couch just as she emerged from the bathroom. She looked startled. "Can't sleep?" I shook my head. "Nah, just thinking." She offered a faint smile, the kind strangers exchange, and walked past me. No kiss, no question, just silence, like we were merely roommates splitting rent. The next morning I played it normal, poured her coffee, asked about her day ahead. She barely glanced up, brushing me off with a vague, "just calls, nothing exciting." Sure, nothing exciting except for Nathan. I called out sick. I needed space, not from her, but from my own denial. By noon, I found myself parked outside the Mediterranean restaurant again. Not stalking, confirming. I needed one last push, one undeniable truth before I dismantled everything. At 12:42, she arrived. At 12:47, so did he. They didn't touch, they didn't need to. The way he leaned in, the way she laughed, biting her lip, it said enough. They were practiced, comfortable. This wasn't a fleeting temptation. It was habit, routine. I snapped a photo. Just one. I'm not sure why. Maybe to prove to myself I wasn't imagining things. As I sat gripping the steering wheel, my phone buzzed. A notification from our shared cloud folder. A calendar invite. Marcia and Haron anniversary dinner. She'd sent it last month. That same night, she had dinner with Nathan instead. She hadn't canceled it. She simply never showed. So tell me, how do you deserve someone's attention when they've already replaced you in their schedule? By the time she walked through the door that evening, I'd already deleted the reminder from both our phones. She wouldn't notice. She hadn't checked shared folders in ages. Not photos, not events, not grocery lists. Once, we planned everything together. Now, we lived parallel lives, and I was the only one still glancing sideways. She kicked off her heels and sighed. Today was brutal. I watched her slip out of that blazer like it was a costume. I almost asked, "What role did you play today, Marcia? Loving wife or captivating lover?" But I stayed silent, not out of fear, but strategy. I wanted to hear what she'd say without prompting, and she didn't disappoint. "Conference call with the West Coast dragged on," she said, massaging her neck with the same hand that had rested on Nathan's arm earlier. "You wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes listening to them." I nodded, feigning interest. Sounds rough. She missed the bitterness beneath the words. Perhaps she knew and simply chose to overlook it. "That's how things are now," she said, her voice steady but hollow. And I let her believe it, for the moment. She headed to shower while I remained on the couch, scrolling through a photo I'd taken earlier. Her expression in that picture was brighter than any smile she'd given me in years. Once she used to light up like that for me alone. Now it seemed she gave that glow away freely over shared meals and whispered secrets. That night I did something I hadn't done in months. I poured myself a drink, not to forget, but to focus. I needed clarity without emotion clouding my thoughts or decisions. Revenge wasn't my goal. I didn't plan to vandalize his car or expose her actions to friends and family. Divorce wasn't even certain in my mind yet. What I wanted, pathetic as it may sound, was acknowledgement. I craved her admission, an unfiltered confession that she had chosen someone else while still sharing our bed. The next morning, I began preparing my exit strategy. Quietly, I met with the bank and separated our finances. She'd notice eventually, but by then, I'd be long gone. From her laptop, I copied every message exchanged between her and Nathan, emailing them to myself before erasing traces of the sent email. I documented everything: receipts, calendar events, even the lipstick-stained coffee cup hidden in the back seat of our car. But I didn't confront her, not yet. I wanted her to lie again, to see how effortlessly deceit rolled off her tongue. So I waited. Later that evening, I told her I'd booked us a weekend getaway, a secluded cabin, no phones, just nature, wine, and each other. Whatever us still meant. She looked surprised. "Seriously?" I nodded. "I thought we needed this. You've seemed stressed lately." She hesitated briefly, blinking twice. "Yeah, maybe it's a good idea." But I saw it, the flicker of doubt crossing her face. It wasn't guilt, it was logistics. She wasn't deciding whether to say yes. She was calculating how to fit this trip into her schedule with him. I smiled faintly and kissed her cheek. "We leave Friday. Let's see how you explain that to Nathan." The night before the trip, she packed in silence. Normally, she'd toss clothes into her suitcase with reckless abandon. But tonight, her movements were deliberate, calculated. Every few minutes, she checked her phone, quickly locking it whenever I passed by. 3 taps, that was her pattern to silence notifications. She wasn't texting me, and excitement certainly wasn't radiating from her. By the time we hit the road the next morning, she was different. Overly polite, almost unnaturally cheerful. She played a playlist we hadn't listened to in years, our old road trip songs, the ones we used to laugh over during fast food stops and argue about during gas station snack runs. But now it felt staged, like she was performing nostalgia instead of reliving it. The cabin was 2 hours away, tucked deep within a pine-scented haven far removed from civilization. I'd chosen it specifically because there was no signal, no Wi-Fi, no easy escape. When we pulled up, she glanced around and remarked, "Wow, it's quiet here." "Yeah," I replied, "that's the point." The first few hours passed uneventfully. We unpacked our belongings, shared a meal, and relaxed by the fireplace. She brought along a book she never opened, while I carried questions I couldn't bring myself to ask. As evening settled in, I poured us both glasses of wine and handed her one. Her smile was faint, almost forced. There was tension in her posture, an uneasiness evident in the way her foot tapped restlessly against the rug. Something felt off. "Everything okay?" I asked, studying her closely. She hesitated before answering. "Yeah, just work stress. It's strange being disconnected." I tilted my head slightly. "No one's expecting you tonight, right?" For a fraction of a second, her body froze, so quickly that someone less observant might have missed it. But I wasn't missing anything anymore. Every detail mattered now. She laughed nervously. "No, why would anyone expect me?" The silence stretched between us as I casually replied, "I figured maybe your boss or Nathan." Her entire demeanor shifted. Panic flashed across her face, raw and unfiltered. "Who?" she whispered. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my wine, letting the moment linger without responding. Slowly, she stood up, setting her glass down with trembling hands. "Haron, what are you talking about?" It was my turn to play my part. I gave her the same empty smile she'd been offering me for months. "Nothing, just a name I stumbled upon when fixing your laptop. Maybe an email thread or dinner plans. Funny how technology tells stories better than people sometimes." She didn't deny it. Not even an attempt at explanation came from her lips. Instead, she said something I hadn't anticipated. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." My laughter filled the room, genuine and bitter. "Oh, so there was a good way to learn my wife has another life?" Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were born of fear. Fear not of losing me, but of losing control over the narrative she thought she owned. "I was going to tell you. I didn't know how." I cut her off sharply. "No, you didn't want to. That's a big difference." She collapsed onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. For the first time, she looked lost, stripped of her usual composure. I sat forward, elbows resting on my knees. "You told me I needed to earn your attention. Well, here we are. Earn my forgiveness." She said nothing because words failed her. That night, she curled up on the far edge of the bed, facing the wall as if it could shield her from reality. I didn't touch her. I didn't speak. I simply lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying memories of nights spent next to someone who had mastered the art of exploiting my vulnerabilities. Once, she used to ask me what scared me most. Back then, I answered, "Losing you." She liked that response. It gave her leverage. In the morning, she pretended the previous night hadn't happened. She made coffee as usual, but didn't bring me a cup. I didn't ask for one either. I merely observed her. The slight tremor in her hands, the deliberate avoidance of eye contact, the silence that hung heavy and hollow between us. When I finally sat across from her at the small wooden table, she broke. "What do you want me to say, Harlan?" "That I messed up?" It was a question I couldn't answer. "Not yet," she said, her voice trembling in ways that seemed to surprise even her. "I didn't plan it." She paused, searching for the right words. "Okay, I was lonely. You were always there, like wallpaper, reliable, predictable, and I needed to feel something again." There it was, the truth cloaked in self-pity. No apology, no remorse, just justification. All I could do was nod, as if I understood. Maybe I did, but understanding doesn't mean excusing. I reached into my jacket and slid a small envelope across the table. She stared at it, hesitant, like it might scorch her skin. "What's this?" she asked cautiously. "Open it," I replied. Inside were printed screenshots, messages, restaurant receipts, and a calendar invite with the words "Trip with N" highlighted. Her face drained of color as she flipped through each page. "You've been tracking me?" she snapped, her tone sharp, defensive. "No," I corrected her. "I've been paying attention. Isn't that what you told me to do? To give you my full attention first? Well, I did. And this is what I got in return." She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound. "You invaded my privacy!" she shouted. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Your privacy? You lost the right to call it that the moment you turned our marriage into a cover story." Her expression twisted as though she wanted to scream, but instead she stormed out of the cabin, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I didn't follow her. I wanted her to sit with it, the cold air, the woods, the echo of her own footsteps. 20 minutes later, she returned, quieter, visibly shaken. "You've shown all of this to someone?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Not yet." Tears welled in her eyes. But they weren't for me. They were for her reputation, her comfort, her carefully constructed double life that now dangled precariously from a thread I held. "So what happens now?" she murmured. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and tossed her phone onto the table. "What happens now? That depends on you. You've got until we get home to decide what truth you're ready to live with and which version of yourself you're ready to face." She didn't move, just sat there staring at her reflection in the darkened screen of her phone, as though she didn't recognize the woman staring back. The drive home was silent, deafeningly so. She didn't attempt to break it. Instead, she stared out the passenger window, arms crossed tightly over her chest, like a sulky teenager being dragged away from summer camp. Each time my phone buzzed in the cup holder, her breathing grew heavier. But she never asked who was messaging me. She already knew it wasn't him. It wasn't Nathan. I hadn't contacted him. Not yet. She probably assumed I would by now, that I'd send angry texts filled with screenshots and hollow threats, maybe even crash the fantasy world they had built together. But I didn't, because this wasn't about him. It was about her, about how she had rewritten our entire marriage in her mind while expecting me to finance the sequel. When we arrived home, she didn't unpack. She didn't ask to talk. She went straight to the bedroom and shut the door behind her. I heard the soft click of the lock, a classic move, as if that small gesture could protect her from the fallout. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Instead, I sat in the living room with Finley, our dog, curled up beside me. He was the only one in the house who hadn't betrayed my trust. Around 3 a.m., I opened my laptop and began writing, not to her, but to myself. It wasn't an emotional diary entry or a rant. It was a plan, concise and clear. I listed everything: shared accounts I'd already separated, a breakdown of her contributions over the past year, barely anything, and a schedule for where I'd stay next month. Not far away, just not here. At the bottom, I added, "If you want to fight, I'll see you in court. If you want peace, I'll see you at the lawyer's office." By morning, I printed it, folded it neatly, and placed it on her nightstand. She didn't say a word about it that day. Not when she emerged from the bedroom, not during coffee, not even during her third work call of the afternoon. But I knew she'd read it. The envelope had been opened, and she avoided looking at me as though I carried some invisible contagion. That evening, I pushed further. "Marcia," I said quietly, "if there's anything left you want to say it tonight, because tomorrow I'm not the same man you've been lying to." She hesitated, searching for the right words, the angle that might still salvage something. "You're not blameless in this," she whispered, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "I never claimed I was," I replied. "But I didn't betray you. I didn't pretend you didn't exist while building a second life behind my back." She sank into a chair across from me, at the same table where we once dreamed of our future. Now it felt like nothing more than a disguised battleground. "I didn't plan to fall for him," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "And I didn't plan to stop loving you," I shot back. "But here we are." She looked at me then, really looked, perhaps for the first time in years. "What do you want me to do?" I leaned in, calm but firm. "Admit it out loud, without excuses. No half-truths. I want to hear you say what you did. Not for closure, for honesty." She stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then, finally, she spoke. "I cheated on you, Haron. I lied. I disrespected you, and I kept doing it because you never stopped being kind to me. That made it easier." The room fell silent. Not peaceful, just still. Honesty doesn't fix everything, but it erases all doubt. The morning after her confession, the house no longer felt like mine. Walking through the kitchen, I could still smell her perfume lingering in the air, mingling with the acrid scent of burnt coffee. Physically, emotionally, maybe permanently, she was already gone. She hadn't taken her belongings yet, but mentally, she'd moved out months ago. I just hadn't wanted to see it until now. I opened the fridge. Her yogurt still sat on the top shelf, untouched. She always bought the raspberry kind, and then forgot about it. That used to irritate me. Staring at the remnants of our life together, it struck me how much I had allowed to slip away. That day, I didn't go to work or reach out to anyone. Instead, I grabbed a trash bag and began clearing out the space. It wasn't fueled by anger, but by a quiet necessity. Anything tied to the facade of our routines went into the bag. Her spa vouchers, love notes she never wrote but kept from others, even the mug that read "Best Wife Ever," which I'd bought in a futile attempt to make her smile. All of it was discarded. Midway through, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She'd left it behind, perhaps intentionally, as a test, or maybe because she no longer cared. I glanced at the screen. A new message from Nathan. "You okay? You haven't responded since yesterday." He didn't freak out, did he? I didn't touch the phone or reply. I simply stared at the words until they seared themselves into my mind. His concern wasn't for me. It was for her. And deep down, I knew he likely mattered more to her than I ever could again. That evening, she returned home. Not quietly, not guiltily, just tired. She looked around, taking note of what was missing. Her framed quotes, scented candles, the decorative bowl where she'd toss her jewelry. Turning to me, she asked, almost accusingly, "You cleaned?" My response was flat. I reset. She paused, then said, "I didn't think you'd actually do it." I tilted my head slightly. "You said I was wallpaper. Guess I peeled off." She sighed and sat down. "So, what happens now? Do you want to end this, officially? I took a long breath before answering. No, I don't want to end it. I want you to. Her expression twisted in confusion. What? I continued. I want you to decide what you're willing to lose, because I already know what I lost. I lost the version of you who used to choose me. Now you choose secrecy. You choose him. So go ahead, choose again. But this time, there's no redo. She didn't respond immediately. She just sat there, blinking, as if realizing the door she'd kept open had quietly closed behind her. I stood up, picked up my bag, and said one last thing before walking out. By the way, he messaged you. I didn't read it, but I hope whatever he wrote was worth the wreckage. As I stepped outside, the night air felt different. Not like freedom, not yet. It felt like silence, but for once, it was mine. 3 days later, the house was still too quiet, though in a new way. Not heavy, not suffocating, just still. Her closet stood half empty. The drawers lacked the chaos of makeup brushes and perfume samples she used to scatter like breadcrumbs of control. Her keys were gone from the hook by the door, and so was the version of her that had weaponized us against each other. The night she left, she sent me a single line. Maybe I was never ready to be loved the way you did. I didn't respond, not out of bitterness, but because I was done wasting words on someone who treated them like background noise. I thought I'd feel shattered. Instead, I felt new. There was no grand confrontation, no dramatic courtroom battle, just silence, boundaries, and paperwork. She didn't put up a fight. Perhaps she knew she'd already lost, or maybe, deep down, she realized I wasn't the pushover she once thought I was. Slowly, I began reclaiming pieces of myself. Small things, like making my own coffee again, taking Finley for 2 walks a day instead of 1. I even signed up for a woodworking class, a hobby she'd once dismissed as frivolous for someone my age. Funny how the very things people mock can end up being the anchors that pull you back to life. One evening, out of habit, I passed the mirror in the hallway, the one she insisted we hang, and stopped. For the first time in years, I saw myself differently. Not as a failure, not as someone who had been left behind, but as a man who had finally stopped waiting for crumbs at a table he had built with his own hands. Yes, I wanted her attention. I asked for it honestly, openly, with nothing but sincerity and heart. She told me to earn it, and in the end I did, just not from her. That's where Harlan's story ends. A quiet man who found his voice, not through shouting, but through certainty. Now it's your turn. Have you ever asked for something simple, only to be made to feel small for wanting it? What part of this story resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts below.